All right, so welcome everyone. I am so excited that I'm here today with Alex, who is going to share some amazing information about balancing your side hustle with your full-time job. Because as we were just talking about, there are so many people that are starting a side hustle on top of their work, and it can be a lot to balance. But Alex has been doing it for quite a while now and has lots of knowledge in this area. So she'll be leveraging the chat and going through a presentation today. I'll let her tell you more about how we're gonna handle all of that. But I guess, Alex, I'll just hand it over to you to introduce yourself and get us started.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, welcome everyone. So I know that juggling a full-time job and a business or a side hustle, it can be both rewarding and overwhelming. I've been living that reality the past few years, and so I'm excited today to lead you through kind of a candid look at the realities of managing both those things and all the other things in your life. We'll talk about benefits, drawbacks, trade-offs, and personal and professional impacts. We'll also talk about some like common scenarios that come up when you're trying to balance these things and how you might handle them. So I'm not an expert, I'm not a business coach, but I've been doing this myself for a few years and I've learned a lot through that time. And my goal is to give you some just things to consider as you apply them to your very individual situation. Because I find, first, everyone's lives are different. We all have different commitments, but also everyone's main job and their side hustle could look very different too. So we'll kind of focus on that, of like things that you can apply to whatever your situation is and questions to consider as you reflect on this for yourself. So I have a confession. I'm not actually a big fan of the side hustle term. I think it kind of like glorifies that like hustle at all costs kind of culture when my philosophy, I'm usually going for more balance in my life, but it's a really common term. So I did use it in some of the marketing for this session, but you'll see me use multiple terms throughout, like side gig, side pursuit, things like that. But really the concept we'll be looking at today is the idea of having kind of a main role, a main position, often full time and often for an employer where you are the employee. And then the dynamic of adding to that or increasing your work in a side gig, side pursuit, usually where it's self-directed and where maybe you're self-employed or you're kind of uh, designing it the way you would like. So that business or side gig could be services, it could be goods, it could be something tactical, it could be something artistic and creative. There's all types of ways to design that pursuit that you are interested in doing. But there's some common dynamics around having kind of your foot in two worlds, like main job, side job, that will be explored today and trying to balance those along with the rest of your life. So excited to jump in and get started. All right, so here's where we're going to go today. I'll share a little bit about me just so you have some context, and I'll learn a little bit about you all as well. We'll talk about benefits and drawbacks. We'll talk about considerations for work, considerations for life. We already talked a little bit about definitions, about your main job and your side thing. And then we'll talk lastly about some common scenarios that come up when you're trying to balance all these things and what would you do in those scenarios. So, a little bit about me. I currently have a full-time role where I'm an employee in the insurance industry. I'm a corporate strategist at a not-for-profit insurance carrier in Oregon. But I also, my side pursuit is I'm a part-time consultant helping colleges and universities streamline their business processes. My background is in higher education, and this has been a neat way for me to kind of keep my connections and my foot in that world that I'm still really excited about supporting education while still going and learning a lot about the insurance industry and really enjoying getting to um, stretch my skills and apply them in a new place. So I've been the co-owner since 2019 of Aljets Consulting LLC, and that's co-owned with my husband Paul. He and I have kind of different but complementary skill sets and expertise areas, and so we decided to found our consulting company together. we'll talk more about this, but essentially for the lower administrative overhead for both of us, which is very important in us balancing our life. So Paul's a data strategist. He designs dashboards, surveys, focus groups, that kind of thing. And I'm all about processes, doing process improvement and optimization, facilitation, as well as training. So together, he and I can do a lot to improve organizations. So, like many of you, I have other life commitments on my plate. I have young kids, I have a preschooler, a toddler, and a third on the way. And I'm also, doing my half of maintaining our household, lots of chores, especially those that young kids create, lots of messes. So I know those extra commitments are, I think, important to mention because when you're adding a side pursuit to your full-time job, all those extra pieces are on your plate as well. And so it's important to figure out a way to kind of mesh and balance these and figure out where there might be conflicts between both your work and your other work, and then both of those types of work and the rest of your life. So it gets a little more complicated here. So if you could take a second, I'd love to learn a little bit about you and where you're coming from. If you could pull up the chat window and maybe share what industry or industries are you in, and what type of side pursuit are you considering starting or scaling up? Give us all a minute to do that. Just be just words or a sentence or two, totally up to you. I don't know. It's also a completely legitimate answer. Oh, nice. Seen some folks in higher education. Awesome. Oh, and agriculture, multiple side pursuits, content creation. Wonderful. Nonprofit industry. Oh, we're doing teaching on the side. Okay. At the university context. Okay. Structural design. Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. That gives me some context of, I think a lot of us have a lot in common. So let's jump in and start exploring this. So I want to go into first kind of the benefits and drawbacks. And so these are some that I outlined, and yours may be similar or maybe different, but I hope this kind of gives you some food for thought. And there's at least one thing in here you haven't really thought of. So some of the benefits of having multiple work streams are kind of the stability, because multiple jobs means multiple revenue streams. And that can be really helpful when, especially when things are disrupted. If there's a layoff or your side business starts not doing so well, you still have that backup of your full-time employment. And so, yeah, oh, I see a note. Not being dependent on one income stream can be really helpful to stability. Also, something I've valued is essentially having access to health insurance still through my job while being able to pursue things on the side as well. So, depending on your access to care, that can be really important. And what, if you have a partner, what they're doing for their work, if you have access to healthcare through them, it can be really helpful for stability to still have a full-time employer. Another benefit I've enjoyed is learning, that really the lessons you learn in your side pursuit can benefit and make you better at your full-time job. And then vice versa, things you're learning in your full-time job can influence your how you're doing your side pursuit. And so if your two things are close together, that you might see more of that learning and that cross learning. But even if they're far apart, there's a lot you can learn about time management and transferable skills, and getting to know different people in different industries that can be beneficial across both directions. And then lastly, it allows for some variety. It's really interesting to be involved in multiple pursuits and industries, and it can let you experiment and try different things without changing your whole life, without changing your full-time employment. And I know multiple people that have essentially used as side pursuit to test whether they're interested, and whether there's maybe a market for the thing that they're wanting to sell, before they leap into doing it full time. So hence the title, Don't Quit Your Day Job, of our session. So along with benefits, there are some drawbacks that are important to think about. So one is just the workload. You're adding another job. And it's important to be really realistic about that and what it will take, especially when you're starting something up. You're doing a lot of things for the first time, and it's going to take you longer. It's not going to be super optimized. You're going to have to learn how to do it. And so it can be a big increase to your workload. And something I've really experienced is that it's impossible to invest 100% in all the areas of your life in all the time. So I often think about things of being like, here's all the areas of my life. Which things do I need to kind of step up in right now? Because there's an immediate need, or that's going to be my focus for this next season. Or which things can I kind of step back on? Can I rely on others? Can I, just do a little bit less of that? Or it's a slower time for that thing in my life. And so that allows me to have a little bit more balance despite being involved in so many areas. There's also essentially you're dividing your attention a little bit between multiple things. And it takes discipline and solid processes to kind of keep all those plates spinning at a time, especially if things are crossing over in terms of your day. I think it's so my husband kind of has the same dynamic too of full-time employment and a side pursuit. And we have completely different reactions to this. I feel really, and when I have a day where I'm doing some full-time work and then maybe like at my lunch, I'm doing a workshop like this, or I'm doing something else, and then I move on. I'm doing something for family after work, and I've essentially touched on all my different areas of my life all in one day. It makes me feel pretty energized. And I'm like, wow, I'm getting so much done. I'm learning. I've got a lot of variety. Whereas my husband really likes to like block his time, and he's like, okay, I do my side pursuit in this specific window, and he like works his schedule to be able to have that so that he doesn't have to divide his mind and his attention as much. And I think those are just kind of some personal preferences about how we work. So being aware of how you work and what sounds energizing to you and what sounds draining to you can be important to how you organize your schedule. And then lastly, there are just kind of the financial piece to this. There's more complex personal finances when you have multiple jobs, and especially if your side pursuit involves self-employment and kind of having your own income streams. There's kind of a lot of definitely doable, but some administrative overhead that comes with that of doing your own bookkeeping and accounting. Filing your taxes will be more complicated. I always used to pride myself on being able to do my own taxes, but when we started our LLC, that was the time in which it was like, okay, it's time to get help with this, time to get a professional to do our taxes. So you do have to file it differently. And at least where I'm living in the US and I'm based in Oregon, you do need to file quarterly payments when you're self-employed to pay your taxes throughout the year. A little different than the way you do it if you were just employed with an employer. You're getting your W-2, they're taking your taxes out. So just some things to be aware of. And it's just a little bit more complicated for kind of forecasting your income so you can do budgeting, and a little more complicated for retirement planning. Although there are some very neat options if you have your own LLC to contribute to your retirement and have another retirement stream for your consulting income. So those are some different things that could be a drawback. They're just more complicated, and it's good to be aware of it up front. All right, so I'm going to go through kind of two sets. So some considerations for work, and then some considerations for your life. So this is diving in more deeply to the work balance, your main job and your side pursuit. So something to think about is it's often helpful to differentiate your main position and your side pursuit. Either have them be in different industries, in different geographies, so that you can minimize kind of complications that come from conflicts of interest. This is something that's helped me in my role, and it's made when I've had conversations with my current employer. We'll get to that in a minute with transparency. It's been helpful for them to know that I'm not trying to work with the same customers. Like I primarily am doing my higher ed consulting with universities out of state, and my current employer works mostly in our state. So that's minimized conflicts of interest and also has maximized my learning because I can meet people in a broader scope of industries and geographies. So I've touched on this a second, but transparency, conflicts of interest, and thinking about your supervisor relationship in your main employing role is helpful to consider up front. Definitely look at your main employer and see if they have any policies. Ones I've seen are around like use of resources and also how you do time off. So I've been doing my consulting job across two different employers now, and they've had kind of different policies and different focuses. Both had rules about not representing yourself as the as from the employer when you're doing outside employment, and which totally makes sense. And then also ones around like not using resources from the employer when you are doing your side pursuit. So like I have a different computer that I use for my consulting role versus my employment role, even though both are happening, both are work from home kind of roles and they're happening both in my house. I actually use different spaces. That one is mostly so that I can count my consulting home office as a tax deduction, which is a lovely thing you can do when you have a business. But yeah, let's see what else. It's important to talk with your supervisor and I feel ethically to be really open about you're doing multiple things. And I know that different people have different philosophies about that and how much their employer should be able to know about what they're doing in their off hours. I've seen enough benefits from being transparent that that's what I would encourage. Because, if you're going to use social media, for instance, your colleagues are going to see what you're doing in your main role. And so it's just nice to be open about that so that you can say, yeah, I'm doing this and that. It's above board, no conflicts of interest. We've talked about it. Yes, of course, my supervisor knows. Here's how we're handling it. And those proactive conversations can minimize a lot of, I don't know, complications down the line. Yeah. So I mentioned social media. It's helpful to think about clarifying your digital footprint because so many things that we're doing are virtual these days, and you're representing yourself in virtual spaces, such as one of the big crossover places I found is on LinkedIn because I'm connected with people at my main employer, but also I'm using it to share about my consulting work or talk about university process mapping, and people that have been my clients are also my connections. So that's kind of an interesting space that mixes both. And so any ways that you can be transparent so that those crossovers are smooth and expected is great. You also might think about how you differentiate your digital footprint of maybe there are sites that you use for your side pursuit and different sites that you use for your main employer. But everyone's setup is going to kind of look a little different that way. And then lastly, I think it's helpful to think about what skills you're building that benefit your main position and benefit your employer, because that's a great way that you can make the case for actually it benefits you that I'm doing this when you're talking to your supervisor, or just I think that is a kind of neat, interesting case to make. So based on these considerations from work, I have some kind of reflection questions for you that you can think about on your own. So how might you differentiate your main position and your side pursuit? What policies do you need to be aware of at your employer related to conflicts of interest? What areas might you need to clarify in your digital footprint and your online presence? And what skills might you build in your side pursuit that benefit your employer and your main position? So if you think about those a little bit, are there any questions that folks would add or any comments about these areas? Feel free to put them in chat. Yeah, I know I mentioned conflict of interest. I'll dive in for a second on that one. That, some employers have a conflict of interest policy where you need to like disclose certain conflicts of interest. Um, like if you have uh, a family member that works for the company or something like that, or a prior business relationship with someone who's a customer, that kind of thing. But it also can be just there could be a policy or it could be something you just start talking about with your supervisor. Like right now, the setup I've set up with my supervisor is that if there's ever some like crossover customer, I would bring it up to her and we talk about it and make sure that there's not a way that there is a conflict of interest where I'd be representing myself or kind of interacting with the same person in two different capacities. I'm not in a customer facing role in my main employment situation, so that makes it pretty easy because I'm hardly ever interacting with customers. But that can be something depending on your two different things. Conflicts may come up more often or less often.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Hmm.
please.
I was more curious about how you divide your time with your main employer. Is it one of those things like, yep, you have to be focused on your insurance job
Hmm.
between 9 and 5, or is it more flexible than that?
Yeah, I think that's varied for me depending on employer, but and I know it could for all of you based on kind of what your two different things are that you're balancing between. Um, my main role is pretty flexible, but I try to essentially plan things for my side gig if it does need to be during 9 to 5. I mean, usually I'm doing the work for it in the evening or on the weekend, that kind of thing. But then if I do need to have a meeting, I'll schedule it at noon, which is my typical lunch, or I'll schedule it at 7 in the morning before I would even typically start work to try and minimize time conflicts because I never want to be not responsive to my main role because of something in my side gig. So that's been how I'm handling it. But and it helps that I typically am working with clients out of state and they're in different time zones. So noon for me is not noon for them. And that makes it great. Does that answer your question, Alexis? So yeah, that'd be one way to handle it. Right. Great. So let's talk a little bit about life and work, and work, and how that crosses over. So, some considerations as you think about the rest of your life are, think about what other commitments you have in your life, family, friends, community, volunteering, other expectations of you that you might need to um, balance or find ways to kind of work those, consider those when you're designing your side pursuits so that you can minimize conflicts. And another is to think about when you're designing your side pursuit, ways to build in the ability to scale it up or scale it back. That can be really helpful in balance. That, if it's going to be constant work, um, it's harder to, or maybe orders that you're accepting months out, and you have to like commit a long ways out. That could be more challenging. So if you have more flexibility in your side pursuit, you can handle less flexibility in the other areas. Whereas maybe if you have a really flexible main job, you could accommodate more of an inflexible side pursuit. So think about that with when you're saying what the flow of like orders or contracts or something would be in your side pursuit. How soon would you know about those things? How far out can you plan? How rigid will that planning be? Like, are you going to have a bunch of deadlines that you have to meet, or is it going to be kind of flexible? Those are some things to think about. You may need to set times in your life that you're like, I will not be accepting new customers in my side pursuit from this time to this time because I know it's really busy for my main employer or something like that. And it reminds me of kind of like if you've used Etsy, like people are like, this store is on a break. Side gigs on a break right now. That kind of thing helps to be able to scale up and down. Um, another piece here, we're in a world where there is capability to do a lot remotely, which is lovely, and that in general, uh, the work world is more flexible with modes of working and different sorts of schedules. So think about what your schedule looks like, both for your two forms of work and your life commitments, whether you're picking kids up or you have things you need to do on the weekend, um, and try and build in. Think about where you're going to see the most conflicts and try to minimize those. Um, and then lastly, the construct I've used is to think about your limiting factor. Like, what do you always run out of first? For me, it's my time. That my consulting role requires like me to be there facilitating or me to design materials. It's not something I can, just passive income where I can like set it up and people just, buy that thing and I ship that kind of thing. So yeah, think about if limiting factors it could be your time, it could be even more specific than that. Maybe it's like between 9 and 5 is like when I have the most commitments. That's the limiting piece. It could be your intellectual capacity of like being able to think through things. It could be your energy of all the different things that you're doing in life may kind of zap your energy and they take up your energy. And so thinking about identifying your limiting factor and then designing your side pursuit around that can be really helpful. Like in my role, since my time is the most limited, I've been trying intentionally to like seek more business that is similar to prior business so that I can like use similar materials and like customize it for the new group rather than having to create kind of new materials every time, is one strategy I've used to decrease the time commitment that I have to put in to doing the same amount in my side pursuit. So yeah, think about those things for yourself. So here's the aligned questions that you might consider. What other life commitments do you have? And in those areas, who can you rely on for help when you need to step up or step back? Could be community partner, whatnot, family members, friends. How might you design your side pursuit so you can scale it up and down easily? What choices could you make in that side pursuit design to give yourself a sustainable schedule? Um, and what factors most limit the growth of your side pursuit? And what might you set up with that in mind? So that, like I said, could be time, energy. It could also be money. If maybe you need like startup capital to get started doing your thing. So thinking about once you identify what's most limiting your growth, you can try and kind of get creative about designing around it and for it, and making choices that essentially like decrease the amount of limit that you're in that time. All right, anything you all are thinking about, questions related to considerations for your life and balancing that? Any other questions you'd add to this list?
I have a question about, and I'm sorry if you already covered this, but just planning for the unknown as far as hours and contracts. Like, I don't know if you want to get into the weeds on this, but I have found that sometimes I'll have a project where I'm excited to take it on and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. And then suddenly I get 3 project requests and they all want to have tons of hours, and then it will be kind of silence for 30 days and not as many contracts. So how do you balance like the ebbs and flows of work demand and also hourly planning and contract details, kind of all of those pieces?
Yeah, I can answer for myself personally, and maybe it'll kind of give you an insight there. But I've found it's pretty sustainable for me to have one like project at a time in my side pursuit. So mine is usually looks like, leading a training for a university team. And, there's like 6 weeks and we meet once a week. And when I have those trainings overlap, I get a little overwhelmed. So, and that's just kind of been from experience of me knowing my capacity, knowing how much the other things in my life take up. So I think as you get going, you will kind of find that rhythm for yourself a lot. And often it's from the times when you feel overwhelmed. Note that and be like, why is there too much right now? What extra did I say yes to that maybe I shouldn't have? And I've often used that when clients come to me with a project and it's like, oh, we want to do this in May. And I'm like, I know I already have another project in May. I'm like, how about June? Um, so we can kind of like offset things and try and try and work, especially in your side pursuit, if it is more self-directed. There's often a lot you can do to um, maybe seek more business at certain times and step back at certain times or commit, being more careful with your commitments. But it is challenging when you start out because you sometimes don't know how long things will take you. Um, I do an estimate and then double it when you're new because like if you haven't done that before, it's always harder to create something for the first time versus edit something you've done before. So I'd put that in your estimates. And yeah, it is also really tempting to say yes to a lot of things when you're starting out because you want all the opportunities. It's exciting. But you can always say not now instead of no. Or how about I do this piece of it for you right now that's the most critical and the rest of it later. So there's definitely more flexibility than folks think. And, you know, a client is coming to you, a customer is coming to you with a need too. You obviously need and want them, but I try and think about it as like a partnership. Does that answer your question, Annie? Fantastic.
We have another question around setting expectations with your main employer. I know it's one thing to balance your own time, but have you ever had an employer worry on your behalf that you wouldn't be able to juggle it all? And how do you kind of appease those worries or fears?
Yeah, for sure. I always really try and have a transparent relationship with my supervisor and be really open about, not that I'm talking about my side pursuits all the time, because I'm definitely not our one-on-ones. We're talking about my main job. But um, I've had let her know, like anytime we talk about it, I say like, oh, like maybe we like the last time was when there was a potential client that might have overlapped because they were located in Oregon. And I just mentioned it was like, oh yeah, remember we had that conflict of interest thing. And I said I'd let you know if there ever was somebody that was even like close to our area of business. And we discussed it and ended up it wasn't going to be a conflict of interest at all. But um, in that conversation, whenever it comes up, I take the opportunity to say something about, if you're ever concerned about my commitment or seeing that I'm not upholding something or concerned about my capacity, please let me know. So that hopefully they'd bring that issue to you. And I'm really sensitive about making sure that I'm following all the policies to the extent that I can and having that documented. I'm not letting my files mingle with each other or oh, it's just a quick call. I'll just use my work computer or um, you know, things like that that would potentially be a sign that then they'd like be watching you more or more concerned. So sometimes those little things can add up and maybe cause concern for someone, even when there isn't really something underlying it. So that's been my approach, kind of dot your I's and cross your T's so that you're getting ahead of any concerns like that. But in general, open communication does a lot. All right, any other questions or things people are thinking about? Well, let's jump into the scenarios, and I think that's gonna give us some interesting food for thought because essentially I've written out 4 potential scenarios. I say potential because potentially they may happen to you, but they've all happened to me before. So I've kind of genericized them and written them in a way that I think could be applied to a lot of different situations. But essentially, these are all situations that might come up when you are engaged in both a primary employment and a side pursuit. And so I want you to think about for each one, how would you handle each? And you can respond in chat or come off mute, depending on your comfort level. Um, And so I'll add there are not right answers to any of these. So I'm not looking for a particular thing. I'll tell you how I handle it, but I think that all of these are interesting because there are multiple ways to address the different scenarios and that come up. All right, so scenario one, we have the time conflict. So you planned a virtual workshop for your side pursuit during your lunch hour, and now your employer is asking you to come into the office that day for an all-day training. What will you do? All right, the chat is open, the mic is open. Would you prioritize the side pursuit and tell your employer, I'm not able to come? Would you go to your employer's thing and try and reschedule the virtual event? Or do something else, perhaps? Yeah, okay. Tell your
I was gonna
employer
say,
you need grants. Yeah.
kind of depends if because this has happened too, where it's like literally a last minute request, and so I don't feel bad for saying, I'm sorry, I already had other plans, whether it be a side business or doctor's appointment or something for my kid, like that, I think is I don't feel guilty about. But then, yeah, if it was far enough in advance, I'd probably try to reschedule my thing
Mm,
and prioritize the all day training. But then I'd ask more questions to learn what the like what's if there's any breaks in the training, if it what is the training about, kind of what understand the purpose a little more. So I don't just feel resentful. Maybe that helps me with a little more buy-in, like, oh, this really is important for my main gig. But yeah, I feel like I need more info. It's a hard
oh,
one.
for sure. It is. Yeah. It sounds like for you, it really depends on how how much time there is ahead. And uh, that makes sense. I love it. I'd make up a doctor's appointment. I know. LOL. I'm sure you're kidding, but yeah, I mean, you can, and everyone has a different relationship with their employer and what they typically share. But, it is completely valid to say, I have another commitment and not specify. So that makes sense. In this one, it was like a month or so out, and I really wanted to go to the all day training and I was excited about it. So I ended up contacting the client I was working with and saying, is there any way we could move this to one of these other times that we talked about? And they were open to that. And because it was a month out, it wasn't as big a deal to the client. So ended up working out. I went to the all day training and was really glad I did. But we could have done it the other way too. Right. Scenario two, the big project. So a previous customer who loves your work contacts you with a big project on a very specific timeline. While you're excited, you're confident that it's too much for you to do all on your own. How might you respond? Give us a minute on the chat. This one's tricky because there's more than two. It's not an either or kind of conflict. Send a few ideas like a longer timeline, bring in another team member, or a smaller deliverable. Okay, let's take it. I love that. So taking that approach of negotiating with the customer kind of aligns with what I was talking about being a partnership. They're coming to you with a need. You need them, but they also need you. You have some flexibility there. Very neat. Yeah. Ask for more time. Be honest about capacity. It makes a ton of sense. Yeah, I've often run into this one because I'm a kind of a solo practitioner as a consultant, and so um, yeah, I've handled this a couple of different ways depending on what the project was. Once I asked for a longer timeline, and that ended up working out well. Another time we can reduce the scope of the project, and we did part of it now and part of it later. And so that kind of spread out the commitment more. Um, and then one other time, I got asked to was applying for an RFP at a university to do like a really big process improvement project. And I was like, this is like so beyond my ability, or even like my ability plus a friend, that I ended up, deciding I was not going to apply, but then sending it to a couple folks I knew at consulting firms who could more like handle that size of project. And it ended up being a great experience because then they were really thankful to me for sharing that opportunity with them, and it was a better fit for them. And I think, I may work with those groups or partner with them in the future. So it was kind of a relationship building opportunity. So that was kind of even like a totally different direction. It was like definitely too big a project. This is why I took that route. Fantastic. All right, let's look at number 3. So this one's a conflict of interest. So while working at your main job, you strike up a conversation with a customer. And you learn they have a need that would be perfect for your side pursuit. Do you mention it? Then another time? How? When? If? Like this one's a lot of it depends. Yeah, it totally depends on relationship with the employer. You might not mention anything in that employee capacity. Mm, Yep. Based on your employer's conflict of interest policy, it would fall within that, so probably not. Yeah, don't think it's worth pursuing. That's true. Yeah, definitely a little bit of risk there. So, well, I've had this come up twice, and I've handled it different ways each time because the context was really different. That once I just, similar to the responses here, just let it go and was like, oh, well, if it comes around again, or maybe if I connect with them in another venue, I will mention it. Um, so that was one direction. And then the other one, I had met someone in um, an external training that was being paid for by my uh, main job employer. And I knew that there was actually a free opportunity, like free to that person, that was coming up in the workshop I was facilitating, but it was for my side pursuit. So that one was tricky. And I was like, okay, like it was enough removed from my current employer that I ended up contacting them on LinkedIn, which is kind of a neutral space, and being like, oh, you met me in this training, but I also have this other hat, and there's a free workshop if that's for people in your state if you're interested. And they were really thankful for that. And it was part enough. I didn't use any of, didn't violate conflict of interest because they weren't a customer of my employer. I didn't use my employer's email or the computer. I was contacting them in a neutral space. So it kind of covered all the bases there. But yeah, this one is definitely complicated. It depends on your relationship with your employer, it depends on their policies, and also depends on the context that someone's reaching out to you in. I've also had the situation before where someone contacts me essentially on the wrong email, and I'll say, "Oh, thank you. Please, I'm going to respond to you from this other email because that's a different part of my life. So I'm not co-mingling things." So there's different ways to handle that. All right. And fourth scenario, which I think whether you have a current side pursuit or not, you might be able to um, resonate with. So lately you've been feeling really run down. You're between life, your main job, and your side pursuit. It's kind of getting to be too much. So which thing will you prioritize and what will need to give? How would you approach this kind of question and situation? Depends on what is the least important in that moment. Yeah. This probably goes back to what I was talking about previously with there being, times you need to step up in different areas and step back in different areas. Um, and yeah, prioritize work, take a few days off, reset. That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, one thing that's nice, usually with your employer, you'll have time off. That's a strategy I've used sometimes to just feeling really overwhelmed with life. And be like, I need to take this Friday off and catch up on whatever's stressing me out. Whether it's the side consulting or, life tasks or just taking a nap. Sometimes that's important. Yeah, great point. Depends on the stage of life, your personal factors. Yeah, could you afford to quit and reduce your hours at your main job? Is there potential in your side hustle to grow it? Yeah. Ooh, get everything down on paper. I love that. It's a good way to feel less stressed and to really just see all those things you need. It can also feel more overwhelming. So, depends on your how you cope and how you kind of handle all the details. But those are great strategies. Yeah, so I think this one is just really helpful to recognize the reality that when you have multiple things going on in your life, you're essentially you're adding a whole nother area by setting up a side pursuit. And so being realistic about that and what it might look like and thinking about the possibilities of, what does it look like when I start to burn out, so that I can see those signs up front and try and address it before things get too intense. How can I design my life and my work around, to the extent that I can, around each other, so that I'm anticipating potential conflicts. I know what my busy seasons are for each thing in my life, so that I can try and make those things not line up. So that's really where you can get into a burnout situation. All right. We have a couple extra minutes. That is the end of the formal part of the presentation. Are there any questions, things that are still currently on your mind, that you'd want to share with the group?
I would love to know this, it's a little bit on the fringe, but I know for a lot of folks, this comes up when I've chatted with people about consulting. How did you, when you're starting out, come up with some of the basics to improve your processes? Because you're a process person, like, do you have a contract that you use? Do you have hourly rates for specific types of work? How do you make that part less time consuming so that that can also help with the burnout?
Yeah, that's a good point. Using my consulting to help myself. Um, I try and kind of make as many like templates and reuse as many things as I can. So I kind of have a, you know, typically like a consulting project for me, someone reaches out and says, I'd like a training on this topic, or I'd like you to, we have this messy process. Can you come in and help my office redesign it? And so I have a kind of a statement of work kind of template that I fill out with what they've said their needs are, and send that to them as like a proposal. So I'm always either editing a prior one of those that I've created or using like my template. And definitely pricing is always hard to figure out. Once you do get it dialed in, kind of having knowing your set pricing. And I've found it really useful to kind of anticipate how many hours something's going to take me. And then I actually do track it on the backside and be like, how accurate was my estimate? So I can get better at estimating for myself over time how long something actually takes me. I think I mentioned before also thinking about ways that you can reuse and repurpose prior work is a helpful strategy. But yeah, try and make as many things automated as you can or as simple as you can. That is really helpful to do. Whenever someone's like, I can invoice you every month, or we can just do one at the end. I often choose one at the end because then I only have to do that admin task once. So there are a lot of choices you can make in your side pursuit to how you set things up of how much time it's going to take you. But yeah.
Alex, I'm curious about how you market your side gig. And is it just word of mouth? You mentioned sometimes RFPs. Are you looking for those opportunities in certain places, or are you marketing yourself?
Yeah, I know this is going to be different for everyone. I primarily use my network and use word of mouth, and most of the time, folks that are coming to me, it's because a colleague had mentioned me, or occasionally I've been trying to post more on LinkedIn, and that has led to a couple leads as well, which is really interesting new direction for me. But higher ed, especially, is a very networked world, and so. Since that's the industry that my side pursuit is in, it's primarily been through word of mouth and people I know already, and that are going to work at a different employer, and they're like, "Oh, can I do your process mapping thing here?" And I'm like, "Yes, you can." So, but that could look different for everyone.
Hi, Alex. It's
Oh,
nice to see you and speak with you. Alex and I used to work together
good.
back in the day. I loved this presentation and just had a quick question, two questions. But if only time allows for one, you can prioritize the first one. But if and how are you leveraging AI in your consulting business? And two, I'm struggling with this myself, but like, how do you showcase previous work with new potential clients? In other words, like, how are you building out your portfolio while not, while honoring the fact that, this is your clients, they technically own it at the end of the day because it's theirs. So yeah, we'd just love to know that balance.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about automating things, and trying to have it be as simple as possible. And I have found, I'm still definitely exploring this direction, but I have found generative AI useful in kind of just simplifying things. So sometimes it's, I need to, especially if I already have something created. Like I had a case study the other week that I had created for one university's context, and I wanted to change it to work in a different sort of context. And I was able to, put that into, I used ChatGPT and said, can you make these changes, make it applicable to, in that case, it was a community college instead of a university. And it got like 85% of the way there and saved me a bunch of time of not having to rewrite something from scratch. So that's an example of maybe how it can be useful, in like essentially it's still your work, you created it, but it's streamlining some of those things that you're needing to translate a lot of times. Now that I think about it, I should explore doing that for my statements of work too. Maybe that would be another time savings. So thank you, Mitzi. Your other question about showcasing work, usually I'll try and maybe just share my materials that I created for them that don't have the parts that don't have that client's information in them. And I'll talk through examples of like, I worked with a mid-size access-focused regional university, and they did process mapping in their enrollment management area. And, we like kind of, so like share about the projects because people are really hoping to see kind of examples of like, oh, have you done this before? But again, I do want to kind of have respect for the products that I'm producing for clients, that I don't ever share their actual materials or things that have their university's data in them.
One other thing I can add, Mitzi, in my experience, I have added into the contract before we sign, I'll talk with certain clients and say, I'd love to have either an anonymized version of this, like I'll remove your name, or I'd love to write in that I can use X material for testimonial purposes after the event. And a lot of times they've been really willing to do that, and it will be written into the contract. So that's another way to get permission ahead of time and see how willing they, like which pieces they're willing to share. And then you feel really comfortable knowing what you can do afterwards.
A vote on transparency. That's awesome. I know we're kind of winding down our time together. Thank you for the great questions and for thinking through these things with me. I hope this has given you some food for thought as you think about how you might design your work and your work life all together and balance all those things together. If you have questions, if we have things in common, I'd love to connect with you. If you know of organizations that have messy processes that need some improvement or need some data dashboards, let me know. Those are kind of my areas of expertise. But I'd love to connect in general, and hope to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex. And thank you everyone for coming. We'll be sending out the recording afterwards to everyone who registered, and then it will also go up on YouTube if you want to rewatch. But otherwise, please do follow up, connect with Alex. She's just has this wealth of information. So thanks everyone. Take care. Wishing you a great rest of the week. Bye, y'all.